Welcome to the Everyday Guy podcast. I am your host, Rudy Marquez. You may be asking yourself, who is Rudy and why the hell would I ever listen to him? Right? Well, let me start by speaking on who I am. And if you like me, you'll like the podcast. If you don't, then I'm sure there's a podcast for you. There's like 700,000 out there. I'm 32 years old, currently live in Southern California. I have two beautiful daughters, and I'm engaged to an amazing woman. I got a 9 to 5, and I do this podcast as a hobby. The reason I do it is because I suffer from depression, severe anxiety, and I also have some bipolar tendencies. I've been diagnosed for about 4 years now, and it came at a time when I was going through a divorce. So that is kind of typical for some depression patients to go through like a trauma, and then depression is often triggered. And sometimes it's just a one-time episode in your life that you just hit a low point. For me, it's more of a manic, so it's constant. I don't think manic, it's more chronic, so it's consistent for me. I've been through some extreme losses and changes in my life, but I'm still here. Like, I'm still freaking here. And aside from my struggles with suicide and mental health, I used to drink like a motherfucker. I started drinking when I was 15, and I never stopped until actually last year. I haven't had a drink in nearly a year, and it's been pretty bad, I guess, I must say. Lost 30 pounds, and that wasn't even working out. Like, that's fucking tight. But what I didn't expect is, what do I do with the time I used to spend in the bar? That time's still there. And I really fell into a deep depression when I faced that stale time. And I started picking up weird and unhealthy ideals from thinking that there's no point to life if I can't get a drink, to feeling like, damn, life is boring as hell without a drink, man. It took me through some deep valleys, dude, to really kind of like find my purpose. And I can't say that I know my purpose at this moment, but I'm trying to figure all this bullshit out. You know what I'm saying? I'm still trying to keep the car going. It's like the way I explain life is, it's a car on a road, and you're just building the car as you're driving it. It's fucking difficult, It's hard to get off the ground. It's hard to get going. Once you do, you gotta keep that car together. The difference in some people and me is I'm doing all of this change, and I'm documenting it through the podcast. And that is something I think is unique to the podcast experience, because you get to go and hear like my deep feelings and struggles and emotions and thoughts that I go through when I face like crazy obstacles in my life that I tend to like fold up and not face sometimes. So when I have like a crazy obstacle, like I get turned down at a job interview that I busted my hump for, like that shit hurts. And how do you rebound from that? Took me a long time to really even develop any concepts to help myself, to better myself. I had skin in the game, dog. This is me. I can't run around just fucking up all the time. And so I find it quite therapeutic just having a conversation, opening a dialogue with the person. And I plan on having just a different variety of guests on the show. my guests will be based around the different segments that I'll be covering. Um, and the segments that I find interesting and fascinating and that I'm going to talk about. Number one is skateboarding. Two is people on the margins of society. Three is going to be my life experiences. Four, just funny ass true stories that I got a lot of them. And then I want to talk about religion and politics with no agenda. No agenda. I am not a Democrat. I am not a Republican. Until they can come up with a party to classify me and where I feel comfortable and I feel that I can align myself with the theories and the morals that they have, then I'll consider myself a political party member. But other than that, fuck them. But I really want to talk about that. I want to talk about what our current state is and where we are in society and religion and politics and our mentality as a people, as Americans. Dirt biking. I'm going to talk about dirt biking. You know, I love it. Family, co-parenting, raising daughters, divorce, alcohol, and of course, all issues surrounding mental health. And there's a reason why I chose to be in the mental health section, because there's no reason to only focus on all the dark and depressing thoughts and experiences. I can focus on everything around mental health, and those segments are all part of my mental well-being. Everything you see here, some of my friends gave me flack, said it looked like I was selling these posters and shit. Somebody else said like somebody went through their high school closet and pulled out some old posters. Man, fuck y'all. Sublime, one of my favorite bands of all fucking time. They are amazing. Kobe, King, legend. He's a true mentor to me. Easy, you know, one of the founders, one of the starters of this hip hop shit. The Mac, he's my favorite comedian. All-time favorite comedian. There is nobody funnier than this man in my eyes. I got Tupac and Biggie right here. Again, founders of rap. I love rap. You know, I don't listen to rap with my kids, but I love it. You know, I love music that'll take you on a journey. You know what I'm saying? Like, take you down a road, take you somewhere you've never been before. Take me out of California. You know what I'm saying? I'll listen to country if it tells a story, a good story, something I can relate to. Hell yeah, I can't relate to riding horses and shit. But then again, I can't relate to having to carry a gun on me just to leave my house and shit. You know what I mean? So, whatever. But that's everything I outline, you know, it makes my life and it helps with my struggle with real poor thoughts and decisions that I've made. It is what makes this podcast up and who I am. I'm a father with depression and some fucked up thoughts and trying to break cycles and progress my family in every way possible. This is my journey, and I'm excited to really share it with all of you guys. Okay, let's move forward. Get some water real quick. I'm trying to remind myself to drink water, you know, because I sound froggy if I don't drink too much water. Alright. This episode's main focus, this segment, is going to be my life experience time. And I'm about to be very vulnerable and real with y'all right now. And that's something I've dealt with in the past and the near past as well. For those new to the show, if you get a chance, check out episode 20 called My Attempt. That shit was a real dark moment in my life. I was going through a divorce and I felt that the only way out was through suicide. So, listen to that episode. It'll give you a real perspective on who I am and why I have this podcast. Today I want to talk about something that I've never talked about with people before. The reason this came about was I was in Target recently, and I saw a young lady, and both of us were reaching for the same lights, right? And when I was reaching for it, I went with my right hand, she went with her left hand. I happened to notice she had cuts on her arms, all kinds of scrapes, deep ones too. You could see the welts of scars coming up, And I just paused there in my tracks, dude, and I got a flush of just some real intense emotions and memories. I wanted to speak to her, but who wants to speak about self-harm, in Target? So I decided I'll talk about it here. I've dealt with self-harm for quite some time. The thing with untreated depression is you cannot pinpoint where or why it hurts so bad in your head and your heart. You just wish you could tell your mom or doctor, like, it's right here. Take it out of me. Excuse me. Take it out of me, because it's gonna kill me one day. And so when you get so upset and angry and depressed, I'd start doing things to myself physically to be able to say, here, that's where the pain is. You see it? You feel better now, Rudy? I'm able to touch it. I'm able to feel it. It becomes attainable. It's concrete to me. It's no longer this abstract feeling of pure misery in my head. And I first experienced self-harm when I was 16, and the situation was my nephew, he was about 5 or 6 years old, and my parents, his grandparents, were fighting to kind of keep him with us, because his mom, we felt, was not fit at that time, and they had some choice words for each other, my mom and my nephew's mother. And I remember being 16 in my room and listening to my parents just screaming obscenities to my nephew's mom and my nephew's mother, just screaming everything at my parents. I mean, it was nasty. Our families have moved on since then, which I'm happy to say. My nephew is amazing. I love my nephew. He'll always be my first son, I'm learning a lot through that kid, and just being his uncle, man, it's a true treasure. But back at that moment, I sat on my bed, and I remember I jumped up crying, because I was crying in my pillow, and I didn't want anyone to hear me crying, so I jumped up, and I was so angry. My fists were clenched. I was already punching the bed and the pillow as hard as I could, but as quiet as I could, so no one would hear me. And I remember I grabbed my Volcom belt, stupid black and white Volcom belt, fucking ugly, and I wrapped it around my neck, and I squeezed it, dude. I squeezed it until like the edge of passing out, and then I'd quickly release it and just let that blood just find its purpose in my brain, dude. And I must have done it like 10 times in a row, and just back to back to back to back, crying my freaking eyes out, dude, till every vein in my head was just popping out. And I it as quiet as possible, dude, so no one would ever have to hear me or notice what I was doing or worry about what I was doing. On the 10th time of me strangling myself with that belt, my nephew knocked on my door and he said, Uncle Woody, can you come out with me? I'm scared. I quickly threw that belt in the closet and opened the door to his little crying face, you know. I never reflected on that situation for years. To be honest, I tried to just bury it and say it never happened. That worked for some time, but not for a long time. It worked for a little bit. This happened about every other year in some way or form. I was I didn't reflect, you know, on these self-harming moments, and I didn't put two and two together. I didn't connect the dots, dude. When I'd get mad or depressed about something, I'd punch the hardest thing I could find so my knuckles could feel that fucking harsh pain that my heart was feeling at that moment. Sometimes I'd punch myself in the face and do damage to my face, dude. I'd crash my fist into my head as hard as possible. Boom, boom, you know? And matter of fact, like, I thought it was fucking cool at some points. Like when I was out at a party, liquored up, about to get down in like a rumble or a fight. And here I am, as angry as possible at the world, punching myself, you know, ready to do whatever I want, whatever I thought was releasing at that moment. Things never got better. I just got better at hiding these things. You know? My issues were still there. I just hid them a lot better. My ex-wife, she never had a clue, and to be honest, I can't remember a time or a lot of times that this might have happened with her, and I'd never expressed this to her at all. It was kind of before her and then after her I noticed, when I really started reflecting. After our divorce, I drove to meet my my wife at the time. She was with our two daughters at a pizza place in Uptown Whittier in my hometown. They had no idea I knew they were there, and I showed up in tears, looking like a real mess. And I kissed my daughters, and I told them I love them. And I told them Daddy will be gone for a little bit. I went back to my empty apartment, and I grabbed that old thing I knew, that belt, wrapped it on the door handle, and there I went again, strangling myself. And that was a memory for me that I hid so deep into myself. And it took a lot out of me to really pull that memory up and to reflect on it and to see the current mindset state that I'm in now and compare it to how I felt in those moments. And again, even after that time in the apartment, I wrapped that belt around the doorknob. I didn't do anything about it. It happened again. This time it was 2019, and this was last year. And I was in another empty apartment feeling like a complete failure again. And who was there for me? That belt in the closet. I went back to what I do and I placed it around my neck and I strangled myself. I just wanted some type of relief from what was killing me inside. And I was drinking through all this shit too, every single time. Except when I was like 16. I don't think I was drinking then. Definitely wasn't drinking with purpose. Like I started drinking when I was like in my 20s. So this self-harm, this wanting to take my emotional pain and translate it into a physical pain, it just continued, and it continued to up until man, if I'm being real here, this year. The beginning of my medication regimen that I was on was fucking intense, dude. And it took me down some deep valleys where I was doing shit that was not in my character. And they were happening, instead of once every other year, they're happening every other day. And there was a time this year, before I started the podcast, and I remember feeling like there's no real purpose for me at that point because I felt like I failed at everything and I've let down everyone in my family and my life. This was this year. I sat in the apartment that I'm currently at. And it's not a Vulcan belt I grab anymore. It was a leather dress belt. And I strangled the shit out of myself as hard as I could. And the shit was this year. And my fiance was actually in the house this time. And she was in the shower and she found me sitting against the wall just crying. And I was so angry with myself that I was like sitting with my head like kneeled down in the corner of the wall, and I just sprung my head back as hard as I could and I put my freaking head through the wall. And then it got worse when I used a knife on myself. I used a knife to try to shave like my knuckle skins off. And I really felt a sense of relief in my head. And it felt like it was okay that my anger at that moment allowed me. It was okay that I dug that knife into my knuckles. And once I started understanding that I'm justifying these things, I said I gotta get some fucking help. I gotta talk about this. I gotta do something about this. It's getting worse. It's getting scary. I never had issues with abuse of children or of women. I was never abused. It was not in my household. But I can talk about self-harming because I've done it. And I understand, one, the sensations that come out of it. The feelings like well, that will heal. That'll be okay. There'll eventually be a scab. Your knuckles are gonna hurt. Your head's gonna hurt. Your face is gonna hurt a little bit. It's okay. It'll go away. You know that. But you don't know that with depression. You don't know that. You don't. You don't know when it's gonna go away. You don't know if it's gonna go away. You just have to, one, you have to come to terms with, you're fucked up. You gotta fix that. You gotta change that. And for me, it took me, cutting my own knuckles with a knife to realize there's gotta be a better way for me to deal with my frustrations and my angers. And so it took me months, but I eventually brought this up with my therapist that I've been seeing for over a year now. And it was scary. It was scary to speak with her about it because I felt like, hey, I'm in therapy. I'm trying to take my pills. I'm not trying to drink. But here I am trying to fucking hurt myself. What am I doing here? Why am I in therapy? Why am I doing any of this? It's not working. I'm gonna give up. You gotta understand, like, I can't keep doing this. I'm gonna give up. And I'm not gonna keep focusing on myself, and I'm just gonna live the nasty shit life that I believed that I should live. And once I got all those fears, frustrations, those fucking distorted thoughts out of my head, I was able to move forward and be able to process these things and look at them as, you know what, I can't blame myself for strangling myself back when I was 16 years old. That's all I thought about was coping. That's what I thought coping was. I had no idea about talking to this or feeling comfortable or feeling comfortable in my own skin or feeling comfortable enough to show emotion. I went off this weird notion that if my father never cried, why should I? I can't show emotion. I'm from LB. I'm out here, I gotta look tough out there. But I'm dying inside. The angriest dudes out there, the most violent dudes are the ones with the most pain. They just have a big, thick fucking layer of anger above their pain. Me, I don't think I have such a thick anger anymore. When I was younger, definitely. Instead of trying to reflect on the situation, I would tell myself, that didn't happen because you're crazy. Don't do shit like that, you fucking weirdo. And then I'd move on to, I don't know, being a wild, drunk ass animal. Chasing women. You know what I'm saying? I found some way or something to do that took me away from who I felt like on the inside. And I never dealt with those things. So now as I'm 33, am I 33? No, I'm 32 years old. And I look back at it as I can't blame myself. I gotta move forward. I gotta look at it and examine it as who I was, not who I am. That was the biggest thing for me. That's who I was. Yeah, I deal with this and I struggle with it. And I have been months away from doing it, and I'm pumped about that. Finding different ways to deal with my frustrations. One way is just facing them. But facing them in a positive and productive manner. Meaning a way that I can speak with them and be with my issues and not have to hide or feel this distorted feeling of self-worthlessness. I didn't want to do that anymore. It was a cycle I did for like 15 years. It's got to stop. stopping now. I'm not gonna have my daughters doing that shit. I'm gonna teach them a better way. But it takes a lot of hard work. And I'm currently going through it now. And this podcast is just an embodiment of my struggle, my obstacles in life, and my successes. So if you find this episode interesting, this is just a part of who I was and why I'm doing this podcast. But I'd love to hear from you. You can find me on any social media platform, the Everyday Guy Podcast. I'm everywhere. All right. Thank you.